Welcome to the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. I am your host, Rohit Bhargava, and we have a very special panel right now where we are going to talk about creating diverse content for kids. And we have an amazing group of panelists who are a collection of thinkers, authors, content creators, a puppeteer. I mean, we have a little bit of every type of experience you can imagine. And this is going to be an absolutely amazing conversation. And I don't want to hold us back from jumping right into it. So let me bring in the panelists one by one. First of all, I'd like to introduce Marilyn Price, master puppeteer. Welcome, Marilyn. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
We also have Carrie Burnell, who's a TV personality, author, extraordinaire, lover of butterflies.
Of course.
Of course, they're all around us. And wonderful, wonderful work. We also have joining us Jordan Terry, who is the author of a kid's book about systemic racism, a wonderful thinker again, and author of a brilliant, brilliant book that we're going to talk about. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And last but not least, we have Becky Kekula, who is not yet an author, although perhaps one day soon, but she works with an organization called Disability In and has done a lot of work in the space of creating content for kids. She has a background coming from Hollywood world and casting. I mean, she's lived multiple lives in multiple careers. And so we are going to jump straight into all of this in this panel discussion. And first of all, I want to talk a little bit about diverse content for kids. And actually, Jordan, I thought I would start with you because you have written a book about a topic that is pretty serious, systemic racism. Mm-hmm. And it's part of a series called A Kid's Book About, and there's many books in that series. And I wonder if you could talk to us about the vision behind not only your book, but about this series that deals with serious topics, but introduces kids in a way that's clear and friendly, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, yeah, A Kid's Book About, founded by Jelani Memory, is just, I think, changing the children's publishing game. The concept is very simple, but it's so important. Jelani found it, a challenge as a parent himself to talk to his kids about difficult topics, and one of those being racism. And he has a multiracial family, and one of his kids that he was trying to explain racism to, he found sort of a challenge to talk about such a difficult topic with a young person. And so what he did is he wrote his story, and that story that he shared with his kids ended up being the first children's book in the Kids Book About series. And his book was the Kids Book About Racism. Well, fast forward a year later, after the murder of George Floyd and the uprising, he reached out to me and said, I want to do something about racism, but about systemic racism, to kind of go that next level deep of sort of analysis in helping people understand why these things continue to happen, why these injustices continue to thrive. And so that's sort of where the idea for my book, A Kid's Book About Systemic Racism, was born. And for me, my intent was to just help young people understand sort of why these injustices are still persisting, even though on the day-to-day basis, sort of the obvious racism, the blatant racism isn't, what it used to be, what the kids might see in movies about the Jim Crow South or about slavery. We've moved beyond that, but a lot of the policies, a lot of the laws, a lot of things that govern our country, they still have those racist ideas built into them. And that's a huge part of understanding systemic racism.
Yeah, and it's so important because one of the things that you see when you look at the work that you've done and with this whole series is sort of encapsulated in your tagline, like the kids are ready, like they're already experiencing this, like they're already talking about it in some way, or at least seeing it. And this belief that, we should protect our kids from dealing with anything serious. I think, as a parent, we don't believe that. We've never believed that. We've always thought, well, let's let the kids kind of see the world and understand the world, because then we're going to prepare them for it. And I love that that's part of the philosophy behind this. I wonder if you could just tell us, like, what was important for you in writing this book specifically, like when you thought about, like, how am I going to tackle this challenge? And this is something that I'm actually going to dig into with some of the other panelists as well. But when you think about this big topic, and then you think about your audience being kids, is your first thought, how do I simplify it? Is your first thought, how do I humanize it? Like, where do you start when it comes to that?
Yeah. So I think for me, and thanks to the guidance of the kids book about team, the starting place is always our own personal stories. And so that's sort of how we approached, developing the book. Is for me to, just share my own personal story and talk about how I experienced racism, and I experienced a lot of sort of confusing, sort of events in my life that I felt like it was, things I was experiencing because I was Black, but I couldn't really prove it, and that's part of this. What systemic racism does is, like, it's all so indirect and built in, that you can't really point to one particular thing and say that's the cause, especially as a young person. So for me, sort of processing that phenomena and developing that understanding and analysis, took 25, 30 years, and so my goal was to help parents, teachers, adults, help to start to have that conversation with children. And for me, by sharing sort of my story and my experience, I hope that would sort of connect with young people and kind of hook them in, but then also, provide these general explanations, that I hope, parents and teachers are helping to contextualize for young people and answer a lot of the questions that are going to come up. So, I see the book as a
Yep.
conversation starter, not as a full answer, but really a tool for opening up that conversation.
It really did that for us, I have to say. So you succeeded in your mission because it was a conversation starter. So that was great. Marilyn, I want to come to you next, and I want to talk to you about, I mean, you're no stranger to heavy topics either. You're surrounded by your friends, many of them, and you talk about in your shows, you use your puppets to do lots of different things. I mean, you talk about Judaism and explaining that to children. You've done many different topics. Uh, Take us back to the beginning when you got started with doing what you're doing now. I mean, how did you get into being a puppeteer, and like, what does a puppeteer do? I mean, take us inside the world, your world.
Okay. What does a puppeteer do? A puppeteer simply takes a story and makes it a visual experience. And why is that important? Is because many of us are visual learners. I, for example, am a visual learner. So I can listen to a story, especially a kid's story, but if I can see it at the same time, it becomes more real. If I can interact with it, it becomes even more real. And a puppet takes from your pieces of imagination and rethinks it. So yes, I was asked, actually quite literally asked, to give a hand to a friend who wanted to create the beginning of a puppet show. I was about to change careers, two careers. I was married, albeit not a mom yet, and I was about to become one. That was a whole career in itself. And I was a management consultant, knowing I didn't want to do that. So I had no idea what a puppeteer did, quite honestly. There were few that were popular then. One named Bert Tilstrom, who did Kukla and Ollie. He's an incredible puppeteer. But there was no schools, and it fit my rather creative, bizarre, I'll go for bizarre imagination. And puppets do in fact speak to pretty much everyone. Very popular in other cultures. As a matter of fact, each particular culture has a puppet that speaks for them and speaks of their language, particularly important in masks and folklore in the African communities. Very important in the Pakistani world. There are the Asian puppets. Every single puppet speaks. But for me, quite honestly, going into every single kind of neighborhood in Chicago, which is where I live, right outside of Chicago, I have to greet a variety of different and diverse, not just cultures, but learners. And puppets work for that. So if I could do a variety of things. I could pick up my hand, I can move it around, I can bring communities in. But what I do with my stories, I do my original stories as well, but I really like to work with classics. And the reason I do is because a classic will go into so many different languages, and then I can encourage literacy through teaching the adults at the same time. So, for example, I am working with a dear librarian friend on a bilingual story so that the audiences in this Spanish speaking community, of which Chicago has a lot of, um, will, the adults don't understand what I'm saying. The kids do. So that means they can't go home and talk about the story, which has amazing lessons in it, the classics, and that's why they're classics. So now, when we do a bilingual show, literally tandem, we pass it back and forth and speak not on top of each other, but so that we can be clear. And we use a classic story, same classic story idea. They can talk about it and they can teach each other. Because truth told, as Jordan just said, truth told, kids get it and they need to teach it oftentimes to their parents. So some of my beautiful diverse communities, I've told puppet shows to people who cannot see, but they can touch. I have told stories with puppets to people who cannot hear. I've used puppets to train social workers and just a variety of wonderful people who need that little tool. I don't mean to demean my buddies back here, to move the stories along and teach ethics, values, and all those small and wonderful things that we need to teach people. So I got into it by chance, literally fell into it, and then got real lucky because I have an ability to say, I can do that, even if I'm not sure yet I can. That is a long answer.
No, it's great. I mean, I think your point about being visual learners, it's such an important one. I wonder if you could talk about whether a certain type of story works best when you're using puppets in this medium of visual language. I mean, do they have to be certain like stories with multiple characters? Do they have to be a certain format of story? I mean, take us inside the actual story side.
The best things to do about life in general is to keep it simple. So, for example, I am always in my stories. I don't go behind a stage. Here I am. And any of these characters behind me, I usually only use ones I make, so you can see the ones that I made. This, whoops, wrong hand. This beautiful creature here, she came to me from Mexico. I use her to teach what a string puppet is. That's what she is. But when I tell a story, I
Do they?
always,
And sorry, I just wanted to ask. Like, is a single like that blue puppet behind you? Is that puppet always the same character, or is
oh
it
no,
like
no, no,
okay?
no. This. They're actors. I mean, they change hats. They, like me. I do. I'm in the story, and my audience is in the story. They have to have a part. If they don't
Yep.
have a part, they can't buy in. That's just the simple truth of life. If you write a great book and no one reads it, who cares? So yes, we are. The puppets are marketing people, and the better ones, the simpler ones, great. And if they can make them themselves, then they can retell the story. So when I do a show with, like, for example, a milk carton made into a cow, and the value in the story is, let's pick an oldie but goodie, the Little Red Hen. The cow in the story made out of the milk carton teaches cooperation. So my concept, not a big stretch, is the next morning when we're pouring the milk, uh, someone will say, I heard yesterday a story where the cow learned to cooperate. Now, that is not a stretch for kids. And it even isn't, and it's not a stretch for educators who pay attention and listen. So I'm always teaching. Everything I do is teaching and listening. So my audiences are not just one diversity, they are a physical, cultural. In one show, I can get a variety of people. I use my Jewish based value stories not as religious, theological edifications. I use them because they're value laden. And so I tell them everywhere with every sort of culture.
So yeah, and I can sort of see those stories forming as you talk about them. We have another visual storyteller on the panel, Carrie Burnell, and Carrie, you are in some groups of children pretty well known for the work that you have done. And I wanted to, just for people who haven't seen that body of work, I wanted to give them a little bit of context and play a very short video of you on air before we jump into the conversation with you. So let's play that video now.
It's almost everything you ever wanted to know about Kerry. Let's hear it for Kerry, everyone. Kerry loves pretending to be a CBeebies character. But which one? Can you guess? That's right. It's Muffin from Third and Bird. Kerry has lovely shiny hair. But not first thing in the morning when she wakes up. Yes, very nice. Ah, yes, much better. Kerry didn't always look the way she does now. Coochie coochie coo. Just take a look at her growing up. Oh, look at Kerry. And that was almost everything you wanted to know about Kerry.
Just everything you wanted to know. Almost everything. I love.
I've seen that for years. It's quite an old clip. I think it's probably about 11 years old. So my hair is probably not as shiny.
That's so funny though that you have that story. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the show.
So it's a channel actually, and it's called CBeebies, and it's the BBC's most prominent children's channel, and I would say it's hugely adored actually. It's got a very, very loyal audience. And I was lucky enough to get my dream job of being a presenter on CBeebies about 12 years ago now. And when I started, you know, things were sort of fairly normal and fine for about the first 4 weeks. And then the complaints started flooding in onto the BBC message boards from parents who were very concerned that a disabled presenter had just materialised like a butterfly on their screens. And there were comments like, well, I don't mind talking about disability, but not at 9 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, we'll come back at 2:30. Or, you know, there was one dad who was saying, you know, I think this is going to make my daughter have her nightmares, make her very frightened of going to sleep. And so then what happened is, and I didn't see any of these comments, I didn't read them, and I certainly didn't respond to them. This was kind of pre-Instagram or Twitter, but it was like the beginning of anonymously, trolling people, I suppose. And then, of course, a journalist got hold of the information, and then there was a big sort of press furore, I suppose. And I actually really welcome the debate, because I think it was very telling, actually, that people were so uncomfortable seeing an actress or a presenter with a physical disability, specifically like mine, which is more aesthetic really than physical impairment. So I'm lucky that my disability doesn't really limit me physically, but when I say aesthetic, I mean it's a problem sometimes for people to look at me. They don't like the way it looks on screen, occasionally in life also, but more so on screen. And it was just a great opportunity to really talk about that prejudice in a very open way. And be able to really air those concerns, which I think like Jordan was saying about the systemic racism, systemic ableism can be the same in that it's often very, very subtle, and is so hard to pinpoint or even pick out, and it's sort of like an undercurrent where you might even be doing it subconsciously. You might not realise that you're actually being ableist. I've probably been ableist at times in my own life without realising it. So it was really.
And just for the benefit of the whole audience, when you say being ableist, like just define that for us.
Oh golly, I'm always.
I think I know what it means, but I'm curious
always
for
get it
your
wrong.
description of it. Yeah.
I think the simplest description is probably that you favour the able-bodied look, narrative, or life. I think from a really early age, we're all presented with this imagery and narrative and storyline of if you want to be successful or attractive or desirable, you need to sort of be able-bodied, and
You need to look a certain way.
Yeah, you need to look a certain way, and it's very rare that we view disability as something that's desirable.
Yep.
And that filters through all the way down. It starts with lawmakers and politics, and it filters all the way down to mums complaining on a message board and saying, I'm uncomfortable with this because I don't want to have a conversation with my child about disability. It's too upsetting or unsettling. And actually, yes.
And it's the parents who are uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, this was 12 years ago, and I should say that I then went on to work for the channel for 8 years and became a children's author alongside that. So, it was only 1 week of my life that it was like that. And there were some gorgeous messages. One mum wrote in, said that her little boy explained it to her and said, oh no, Kerry just stopped growing in her mummy's tummy when she was perfect, and that's why she's got one hand.
That's so sweet.
That is just, only a child could come up with that.
I love that. Love that.
Other children were in families where, the uncle or the granddad was saying, oh no, turn this off, we don't want to see her. And the child was saying, no, granddad, you need to accept everyone. So, children are often the best at dealing with disability because they're so instantaneous and they just ask the question and then move on. Really, they're just interested in, where did you get your shoes from? Or, have you got a dog? And the fact that you've got a disability very, very quickly becomes, part of the background. And, there's my own daughter, Amelie, in that picture. So she was a baby when I started on the CBeebies. She's now 12. Just to come back to, we were talking about the parents complaining, and I think it's really important to say that I don't have any issue with those parents. I think they were just reflecting an attitude that already exists, or certainly existed within society. Right. They were just being the mirror of that, really. And actually, some children would have been really uncomfortable with seeing a disabled presenter because they just haven't been exposed to it before, which then begs the question, why? Why don't we have more fabulous disabled actors, authors, presenters, newsreaders?
Well, that is
media.
Yeah, I have to say thank you, because that is a perfect segue to actually bringing Becky into the conversation.
Let's get her on.
Because she's done work specifically in this area, although this is not your space currently. You've worked in casting. You've worked, and now you're at a group that is a nonprofit that really advocates for people with all sorts of disabilities, and so I wonder if maybe we could start the conversation just with whether you do see a change right now in the images and the characters in media, in the books that kids are reading. I mean, do you see, we're sort of assuming that there is a shift because of the makeup of this panel, right? But I wonder if that's actually happening. Do you actually see that shift? And if so, what is that shift in your perspective?
I think the reality is just over time, there have been more outlets for release, whether it's digital or print or however someone may get their content to the end user. And I think it is still being mixed in with inauthentic content. So there are statistics as far as the media industry goes, where there are 3% of roles in Hollywood that portray disability. But of the 3% of roles in Hollywood that portray disability, only about 15% of those are played by actors who actually have the lived experience of the disability that's being told in the story. So there's still a very far way to go, especially when it comes to media, whether it's TV, news, movies. But when it comes to storytelling in books, I've definitely seen a lot more stories that portray disability in one way or another. I think even books that have been adapted into films, they're more likely to find people who have that authentic lived experience in order to authentically tell the story of the book. If you take a story like Wonder, where they have that in all the different schools, and then the kids can see the movie and see that experience. I think just the previous panelists really hit the nail on the head when it comes to just the reactions. It's sometimes the creators who are not really having open conversations with the casting directors are thinking about one thing, and maybe they're more open-minded than the casting directors think they are, but casting still is in that mindset of, let's find the perfect person so we don't scare people when we're telling this story, and then it ends up taking away from the importance of the storyline.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I actually want to bring everybody in now and turn it into a little bit more of a conversation. We've done a bunch of sort of individual dialogue, which has been great, but one of the things that I think is sort of a broad idea of this panel is that perhaps creating diverse content for kids is a double opportunity, in the sense that one opportunity is we teach kids early on in life that there are people who don't look like them and they're not someone that they need to be afraid of. But perhaps it's also a way of introducing these ideas to parents in a non-threatening way that maybe shifts their perceptions too. And so one of the things that I love about all of you is that you've all been in the sorts of roles and experiences where you've had real stories of interaction with people, back when we used to be able to go out and talk to people like in person. And so maybe Jordan, just to go back to you, since you wrote the book, what have you heard back? Like, what have people said back to you? And then I actually want to turn it into a little bit of a conversation amongst everyone to just say, look, what do people say? Like, what are the reactions when they do read a book about, when a kid does read a book about systemic racism, and you hear from the kids or the parents? What are the reactions when a child sits through a show with puppets that explains a classic to them, or explains a religion that they don't know anything about? Or they see a character or somebody on the screen, or they read a book that changes their perception. Like, Jordan, I feel like it's been a long time since you said anything, so we're going to start with you, but then I want to make it a little bit more of an open conversation from there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So the feedback that I've gotten so far has been very positive, but I have, of course, come up against some conspiracy theorists and stuff like that online. But
and what's the conspiracy theory that you're trying to explain to kids, something that doesn't exist? Is that
exactly.
Okay.
Right. It is, it's propaganda. This is all fake news. Like, there's no such thing as systemic racism. So you definitely have those people out there, but I don't think they're the ones that have actually bought the book.
Yeah, they are unfortunately the ones who post the Amazon reviews, though, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, let's face it, most adults don't understand systemic racism. And so that's part of the feedback that I've received, is that it's been really helpful for adults to even understand the concept of systemic racism, and then to be able to talk about it with the young people in their lives. And my fear in writing a book was, it's a children's book. And so I had to make a lot of generalizations, and I couldn't go as in depth as I would have liked to. And my hope was that you know, the person that would be reading this book with the young person, or the adult that they would have around them, would be able to kind of provide those nuance and that context. Because, you know, I did have to make a lot of generalizations in the book just to keep it simple, right? But the feedback has been, you know, the kids get it and they love it, which is, you know, like, oh, you know,
that's the important thing, right?
Yeah, you know, they want to, you know, they read it more than once, you know, they read it all the time. It's their favorite book. And I'm like, what? That's kind of crazy. But like, you know, that's just, kids like stories, and my story is in there. And I think it's something that resonates with them because they're seeing it and they're experiencing it already at these very young ages. So I think it's, you know, it's just
I love that.
a testament to how much this content is needed.
Now, Marilyn, you've seen kids over a span of time that has included them sort of getting the iPad and getting the iPhone, and maybe not getting it, but like spending a lot more time on it as the screens get better and as the apps get better and the content gets better. So maybe you could talk about this idea of the reactions you've gotten through the span of time also. I mean, I'm very curious about whether the reactions you see from kids now, 2021, are different than what you saw 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
No. Yeah. The only thing is, it's oddly enough, this medium, if you can see your audience, is much more intimate. I mean, I'm in their home and they're in mine. So it's not a lot different. This is kind of reverse of what I think we're talking about. Oftentimes my employers, the people who hire me to bring me into places, are worried because I am this short white woman going into neighborhoods that are different. And and it's always worked, by the way. It's not like, my argument is, we need to know that we're okay. So send me in. Of course, I'd love to have someone study with me and become a puppeteer. That is my main goal in life, is to hand down this wonderful occupation. If there's anyone out there that'd like to be a puppeteer, call me up. I'd love to have.
Hey, apprentice opportunity right here.
Absolutely, mention along with me. But the truth goes that we need to be in places where we're just regular people, just like the people in your neighborhood. And that's important for each and every one of us. I can see that we walk into a place where the audience is different than we are, and we need to overcome the differences. So not exactly sure that's what you were listening for, but it's becoming easier. Maybe it's just because I'm, thank goodness, older and get into more and more and more neighborhoods now. And now the beauty of this medium is I can be in neighborhoods. I'm in my programs now. I can be in Massachusetts on Thursday, Florida on Friday, Atlanta on Sunday, and here I am. You know,
Yep.
And it's fascinating. And yes, they still respond to puppets and stories. And what Jordan just said about his books, if kids will read them over and over and over again. How many times did I read Goodnight Moon to my little boy, who's way older now, and now reads it to his kids? I mean, it's those classics with all the hidden little innuendos that you get over and over and over again, and they change, but they're the same.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to shift us towards kind of giving those sorts of takeaways and action items. And Carrie, one of the things that interested me about your story is you were creating content, you were broadcasting, and then you became a mom, and now you've got your daughter. And maybe you can talk about, in the context of big takeaways, and one of the things that we want to do with all of the conversations as part of this summit is we want to really pick the brains of all of the panelists that we have and their experiences and their expertise to talk about how we all might shift our perspective and what we could learn, no matter what age we are, from the diverse content that all of you have been creating for kids and the diverse opportunities that those create. So, Carrie, maybe give us a takeaway from what you've learned. And maybe it actually comes from your intersection of being a content creator and also being a parent.
I think Marilyn described the experience of becoming a parent so beautifully, where she said, well, that was another job, because it can feel like that. You know, it is like, job is perhaps not quite the right word, but it's so full on and it's so life changing. And I think it affects everything that you do. Especially if you're working in creative industries, it just opens your eyes to so many different approaches. And, you know, I'm a children's author, so it's been magical really to have a way into that world through her and with her. And, you know, just picking up on what Jordan was saying about, you know, kids loving the book, it's their favourite book, they want to read it every night. I think it's really important to remember that, you know, representation does matter, as we all really know, but children seeing themselves in a book and actually saying, well, oh, that person's like me, that person looks like me, that person lived where I live, that person has my story, is so magical. And it can be very literal. So it can be, you know, a non-fiction book, you know, Jordan telling his story, something that has happened, or it could be, you know, I don't know, Rainbow Bright, who lives on a rainbow. And it could be something really magical, but that child still really connects with it and really still imagines themselves in the world of the book. So I would say, you know, if you're a parent, just read as diversely as you can to your children and let them lead the way as well, because, you know, all reading has value. I was trying to read my daughter all these classical stories before she was probably ready for them, and she just wanted to read My Little Pony. And actually, you know, there's still merit in that. You know, that there's still stories, okay, that, you know, they're ever so kind of sickly sweet, but, you know, the crux of the message is be a nice person and have good friends. You know, they're all about friendship, so that, you know, there's a really good element that you can take away from books that have some form of nourishment, you know, even if they're very branded, or if you think, oh, I don't want to read this, you know, actually, I think if you want to create sort of lifelong literacy, you have to give your children freedom to enjoy the stories that they love, but you also have to provide, you know, a really inclusive range of books for them to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a beautiful simplicity in that, and in all of your work, really. I think, Becky, I want to turn to you, because your work really intersects with this when it comes to pushing forward the shift in perception that's required, both on the behalf of kids and adults, but also organizations. Because you're doing so much work with organizations through the disability in group that you're part of. So what have you seen that really works to help people sort of embrace those values, like those core things that Carrie said, like just be a good person, like, you know, have good friends, like some of these things that are kindergarten lessons, right? Or at least we often describe them that way, and they're really at the heart of so many stories that we make for children, but also they're at the heart of the things that we often forget as adults.
Yeah, great question. So I grew up in a family that was super supportive of me going after whatever it was I was passionate about. But the reality is not many people are as fortunate as I am. As a person with dwarfism, I'm the only person with dwarfism in my family. And I'm only one of 30,000 people with dwarfism in the United States. So the reason why authentic storytelling is so important to me is that historically people with dwarfism have been portrayed as leprechauns or elves, and then people in society think that we are those characters in real life. So it's important, even when you're including someone with any type of disability or difference in a storyline, that you also have different storylines, because there are different ways that different people with different disabilities live. And hopefully we can get to a point someday where people can just treat people like humans versus reacting based on what they saw previously. And that affects getting into the workplace. So when I was first applying to jobs, I ended up sending out 1,000 resumes and I went on 100 interviews. And every time I walked in the room, I was judged based on my physical appearance. Nobody verbally said anything because they knew that could get them in a lot of trouble, but there was a lot of fear. There were people shaking in my presence, asking me how I got to the interview, not thinking that I could drive with a few adaptations. There are just those quick reactions looking at someone who's 4 feet tall as an adult, someone who they've never seen someone like before. And it really just affects how people react to us in everyday life. And that is why authentic storytelling is so important, because it does impact every aspect of life. And I think we need to continue to tell those authentic stories, but also understand that that's only one story about one person with that type of difference. And there are so many other ways that they live too.
Yeah, it really does bring it to life. So many of the things you're saying, because we don't understand the experiences that we don't experience in any way, right? And so we have to have a chance to. Sometimes we meet somebody who's different than us. Sometimes we read something or watch something that introduces us to that different perspective. And those are the opportunities. Like, that's what we're talking about in this panel, which makes it so real for so many people. And I think it's this power of creating something or introducing someone to something unfamiliar, and introducing them to that when they're kids is doubly, triply, I don't even know what the multiple is, but it's like more powerful, because it's even before they've shaped those perceptions or even shaped any biases that they may end up with later on in life. So you're all doing such amazing, important work. And I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you to all of you for doing that. It's just brilliant, brilliant stuff. We have been talking about bringing these things together. We've heard tips from all of you on how to make it real. I wanted to sort of finalize this conversation, even though I hate to end it, by reminding everyone that everybody on this panel has been creating or doing amazing work. And you have an opportunity to support that work by getting the book, watching the content, engaging with them. They're all easily reachable through online means and through social means. Trust me, that's how I reach them. So I know they're quite easy to get a hold of, and their content is absolutely fantastic. I would encourage you to check it out, whether you have kids or even if you just want to learn on your own. There's a beautiful simplicity to all of this content. I highly, highly recommend checking it out. This has been a conversation about creating diverse content for kids and why it matters as part of the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. You can find out more about the summit and watch more of the sessions at nonobviousdiversity.com. Our hashtag for the entire event is nonobviousdiversity. We will be having a huge conversation about all of these things. We are grateful to all of you for being part of this conversation. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Rohit Bhargava, and remember, always stay non-obvious.